Hello, in this video today I'm going to share with you how to make the bunny standing stuffy, which is a project that you can find in Design Space in one of their ready-made projects. It says it's for an intermediate sewist and it takes about an hour to 2 hours to make. So I printed out my instructions, and I always read them over before I start, make sure I understand what it's asking me to do. And then if I need to make any adjustments to it, because I don't particularly care for how they're doing it, and I like to sew my own way. So I'm going to share with you how I made this project. The first thing I did that was different is that when I cut out I think it's the first mat, let me double check this. You can't customize this pattern either, which is kind of too bad because there's a few things I would change different about how it's made, and the pieces are cut. Anyway, the first mat is supposed to be white felt, and that's what's going to make the ears. I did not want to use felt. I wanted to use the fabric that I'm going to use for the body, the rest of the bunny here. So what I did was I applied to the back fusible heat and bond. That's what it looks like here. This is a package of it, and I used the light sewable because I wanted to be able to sew through this. I'm not sure if I'm going to sew or not, but I still wanted that ability. Another thing I did was I did not use the water washable pen fabric pen to mark my fabric pieces. I didn't do anything because I don't want to put a face on it. The other thing is I don't particularly like the Cricut washable fabric pen that they make. I've asked multiple times if they could please make one that is a fabric pen, but it is either an invisible ink pen or one that disappears when you apply heat to it. The water washable one, you have to wash your project. This bunny is not a washable project at all. This is something that you're going to make and you're going to put it out for display, or a child's going to play with it. You might wash it then. But if you're going to use it for display, you're never going to really wash this. So you have to get the fabric wet in order to remove the ink. And it smears everywhere. I personally just don't like it. So that's my thing. Anyway. The other thing I did was I applied that same heat and bond to the back of my felt pieces that go in the center of the ear. I'm not sure if I was going to use those, but after cutting it out and looking at it, I decided I will use that. So the next thing I'm going to do is, here's my one ear, and these are the back side where I fused the heat and bond light onto the back. And now I'm going to put these together, right sides together, or excuse me, wrong sides together, the infusible side together. And there's a left ear and a right ear, so make sure that the pieces match up. And then I'm going to center the pink felt for the center of the ear over the piece. And now I'm going to just take this over to my mini easy press, and I'm going to hit this on 3. I have my heat regulator up to the 3 bars, and just let this all fuse together. So I'll be right back. All right, so I have both my ears ready to go now. So that's them fused together. One thing I forgot to mention was with the heat and bond, just follow the manufacturer's direction on how to apply that. And what I did was I applied it to the wrong side of the fabric. Then I peeled off my paper backing and I placed that down on my fabric mat. I put the double-sided adhesive side, the heat and bond side down. You could do it the other way. It really doesn't matter. and I used the cotton bonded fabric setting, and I changed my tool to be the rotary blade to cut my fabric. So that's what I did, and I also did that with the felt, the exact same thing. So now the next step, I think, and like I said, I'm not putting the face on. So just follow the directions for doing the either the heat transfer vinyl or hand stitching on the face if you decide you want to add the face. And again, I wouldn't use the water washable pens. I would just eyeball where to sew it onto the top head pieces. So I am now on to 12, which is doing the arms. That's where I have jumped ahead to. So we're on step 12, doing the arms. Now you put the right sides of your two fabric arm pieces together. You're going to have two of these. And it says to do a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Let me show you on my seam guide. That's what a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance is when you look at this. So I'm just going to show you what would happen if you actually did that. So I'm just going to put a pin there. I'm going to come on to this other side and put another pin in. So that's showing you where your seam lines should be, that it's saying. Well, that makes dinky little arms that are very, very narrow, that are very difficult to turn. So instead, what I chose to do is I used a 1/4 of an inch seam. So I stitched all the way around this at a 1/4 of an inch. Then I took my scissors and around this top curved edge here, I nipped in towards my stitch seam, being careful that I didn't cut my actual stitches. And I cut about every 1/4 of an inch or less. I took a little nip in all around this side. And what that does is that allows, when you turn this to the right side out, that allows this curve to be nice and smooth for you. So that's just how I chose to do the arms different. So now I am going to turn this, just using my fingers, to the right side, out, just gently pull out your fabric to turn this to the right side, just using my fingers here for this part, and just slowly working. There's no rush, just slowly working it all out. So you can imagine it's not difficult to turn it when it's this big, but it does take a little work, and can just imagine trying to turn this if it was sewn with the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All I can say is good luck trying to do that. Okay, so I pretty much got most of the arm turned right side out. Now I have this little gadget here. This is like one of my favorite little sewing tool gadgets. It's called a point turner. I'm going to shove this inside, and around that curved edge, I'm going to poke out all the fabric. Now I'm going to turn it with the pointy side. This is a dull point. You still have to be careful that you don't poke through your fabric, but I'm going to do my final little go around. Okay, so now I have this all to the right side out. It's all poked out. So this is polyfill. I'm an old-time sewer, so I like to use polyfill. You can use the pellets. Choice is yours. I like this stuff because then I can control exactly where it goes and how much I put in. So I'm just slowly pushing this in, just using my finger here to gently move it down to the tip. Now I can stuff this so it is like a sausage, and then you'll have very stiff arms, or I could sew it with a loose, stuff it with a looser pack, like I'm doing here, so that it is not quite as rigid. I've already done my other arm, so now I've got my two arms done. All right, we're now up to step 15, which is to sew the two piece for the front and the back. Here's your head, the curved piece, and then the body is this other piece. So you put these, one of each, right side together. And again, I'm using a 1/4 of an inch seam, just what I like to do for crafting, 1/4 of an inch seam. Did that to both the front and the back pieces, so I have two full body pieces now. I say if we could customize this, I would have actually cut this all as one piece, not two pieces. But you can't, so we have two pieces. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach my arms to where I want them to be. And I'm thinking I'm going to put them about an inch down from the seam that we just created. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that I ironed the seam in the back flat going down. So both pieces go down towards the body. Now I'm going to put an inch from that. I'm just going to put pins in here to mark that inch on both sides, just like that. Seam gauge is another handy item to have for measuring. There you go. So that shows that it's an inch down. Now I'm going to take my arm and make sure that my stuffing is inside so that there's no stuffing here at the end. And I'm going to place the arm where that pin was. So the top of the arm is 1 inch down from that seam. I'm going to place 2 pins. You can use clips if you like to use clips. Again, I'm old school. I'm a pin kind of girl. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to pin in my other arm, lining up the raw edges together. Okay, now I'm going to take my ears. Here's my ears, the two that I fused together, and I'm going to overlap these a little bit, just like that. And I'm going to turn this here at the top and line it up with the top edges. Kind of curve it a little bit around because the top curves. And again, I'm just going to use some pins. Now, because I have that heat and bond, these are a little hard to get a pin through. That's okay. Just go ahead and poke it through. Okay, so now I have my arms in place where I want them, and I have my ears in place. That's all put on the right side. Actually, this is the back of my bunny. This is my front piece that I am now going to place so that these, the back and the front, are right sides together. And I'm going to go around and line up these sides and across the curved head and pin all this together. I'm not going to remove my pins that I used to hold my arm in. I'm going to add additional pins. You can certainly remove those if you'd like. I'm just choosing not to. I'm also going to come here where the front and the back, where I sewed the head together, line up. And what I'm going to do is right at the top of this seam at the 1/4 of an inch mark, I'm going to put a pin through. Now I'm going to come to my back piece and I am going to poke the tip of the pin right into that same place. And I'm going to squish the two fabrics together and make sure that my pin is straight, sticking through, and that aligned up those two seams. Now I'm just poking it out so the pin stays in place there. Again, just adding a few pins here to hold the front to the back as we go around. So once I get all this pinned, I'll be right back. All right, so I pinned my 2 front and back pieces all the way around. With the arms, you can kind of see they're right here, they're puffy through here, and my ears are pinned in here at the top. So now, again, I'm going to use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew starting at the base, that's the flat end here, up, sewing towards the head, the round curved head, removing my pins before I get to it. And I'm just going to lock my stitches into place by doing a front, then a little back stitch, and just sewing all around using the outside of my zigzag foot here as my 1/4 of an inch seam guide. Try to remember to remove those pins as you get to them, because sewing over pins can be dangerous. You can actually break off your needle and it can fly up and hit you in the face. Or if you hit them, it will dull your sewing needle and you'll just find yourself changing your needle all the time. All right, so I'm just going to continue to sew around this, removing the pins as I get to them till I get to the other end, and I'll be back once I finish sewing this. One thing I forgot to mention on this bunny's body is that when you go to sew around the body pieces to attach them, you want to leave an area where you don't sew between. And it says to leave a 3 to 4 inch opening here. So I sewed from one side up to this black pin. I like to use a black pin as just a reminder to myself as I'm sewing that, oh, I see a black pin, there's something I need to do here. In this case is sew up to that point and then back stitch back. Then come up to the next black pin and start here and sew here and continue all the way around the body so that this is open through here and not stitched, so that you have a place to turn your body before to stuff it. All right, so I sewed all around except for the bottom here. So that is still open so that we can turn this and stuff it. Now another tip is just to make sure you cut your threads back to your fabric. Do not leave those threads with tails on them, because that's a sure sign that something's homemade. So the next thing, I think we're at like step 18 now, 19, and it's saying to clip generously around the curves, which is around the head part, and then to trim down to a 1/4 of an inch. Well, we're already at a 1/4 of an inch, so we just saved one step. So I am just going to go clip all around this top, being careful that I am not clipping through my seam, and I'll be back once I get all that done. But anyway, you can get the idea. This is all you do, just with the tips of your scissors. All right. Okay, so I trimmed all around this curves here. You can see that's all nipped all the way down to about where I attached the head piece to the body of this. So that is number 18. So now we're on number 19, which says to take this bottom piece here, the last piece that is remaining, and we're going to do a gathering stitch at a 1/4 of an inch all the way around this edge. And what a gathering stitch is it's just a single basting stitch through one layer of fabric, done as wide a stitch length or as long a stitch length as your machine can do. And do not lock this seam in. leave it loose. So we're just going to sew in a forward direction. No forward, back, forward direction to lock it in. So just going to slowly sew around. There's no race when you're sewing, by the way. Use your fingertips to help guide your fabric and turn it as you go around the curve here. Trying to stay at as close to 1/4 of an inch as you can. Doesn't have to be exact, but you want to be in that ballpark. I said using my fingertips to control the fabric, going around, coming up on where I started and just stopping right there where I started. Always stop with your needle up, by the way. That keeps you from getting that weird looping sometime you get of your threads here where you have it like coming out, going back, coming out and going back. That is stopping with your needle down causes that. Just a little heads up on that one. Okay, so now what you have is a long length basting stitch just going all the way around at the 1/4 inch, which is our seam allowance. So on the inside, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, or on the back side, I'm going to take these threads and I'm just going to give them a gentle pull, just one of them. And you can see how it's gathering it up just gently. We don't want a lot of gather here. We just want a nice, easy gather. Kind of going around the whole thing. Be careful that you don't pull too hard because the thread can break. So I'm just gently pulling this up and slowly using my fingertips to spread this around, coming down to this other curved edge because you're going to want most of it on your curves because that's where you're going to need to kind of gather this. All right, almost got it as far as I want. If you don't do enough of this, that's no problem. You just do it when you're pinning it in. And if you do too much, again, no biggie. You just move your fingers gently back towards where these thread pieces are, and it'll loosen it up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in to the bottom of my little stuffy guy here, and I am going to find about where I think the side is here, and I am going to put that to match my side seam, and I'm going to put a pin right here just to hold this. Now I'm going to rotate it around and find my other end right about there. This is fine to just do this by eyeballing. And I'm going to, again, put it with my side seam and match it up there. And now I'm going to go around and try to find the front where this is going to match. I could have marked all this before I started, and that would have been more precise, but I'm just eyeballing it. It's just a little craft project. And doing the same thing on the back here now. All right, and now I'm going to see how I did as far as how much I pulled up. Well, you can see that this piece, the bottom, is bigger than my outer piece. So I need to pull a little bit more on these threads to gather it a little bit more through here. So I'm just going to give this a tug. And again, using my fingers, I'm going to move the gather down here to this area. And look at that. Now it's pretty much right on target. So I'm just going to add a few pins through here to hold this. And I'm going to go around and do that all the way around this bottom. Just gently pulling this up and pinning this into place as I do that. And working all around the bottom. Okay, so I'll be back once I get this all done. All right, I have this all pinned in place, and we're at step 22. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and at 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to sew the bottom to the body. So I'm going to lock my stitching into place, forward and back, and then I'm going to pull out these pins as I get to them. Now when you're doing this, be careful that you keep your body smooth. This gathered part isn't going to be smooth at the bottom, but you want the body, this back part here, you want that fabric to be smooth. You don't want it to be gathered. So just slowly sewing around. If you go slow and adjust your fabric, it should stay nice and smooth on the back. Just check it periodically. Make sure that it's not bunching up back there. And we're almost back to the starting point. Again, sewing about 1/4 of an inch away, not the 5/8 that the pattern calls for. 5/8 in sewing seam allowance is really for garment sewing. It's not for craft sewing. And this is definitely not a garment. All right, so I've come around to where I started, and again, I'm going to lock my stitches in. All right, perfect. Stopping with the needle up and cutting my threads back all the way to my fabric. Okay, now the basting thread, gathering thread that you used, you can pull it out at this point because depending on how you sewed the seam, sometimes it can show. If it is going to be at the bottom of the the bottom of the bunny's body, so if that bothers you, go ahead and pull it out. I say it's easier to do that if you use a contrasting fabric thread, that you can really see where this basting or gathering thread is. Because I used one, just the regular thread that I'm using, which matches my project, so it makes it harder to see. And I may have to wait till I get more inside, or turn this the right side, and then I'll be able to see what stitches show. All right, I think I'm getting it. I'm finding it. Because it's sewn at a longer stitch length, so it's easy to figure out which one is my gathering stitch and which one is my sewing stitch. Okay, I think I got most of it out. All right, so now remember that little opening we left in the side? That's why this is so important, because if you didn't leave an opening to turn this right side out, you'd be stuck right now. So what I'm doing is I'm slowly pushing my fabric out through that hole. And I'm just pulling it out with my fingertips gently. Say we're going to be moving some arms through here shortly. There's some arms. And then pretty soon here come the ears, and we can use those to tug, and voila. It is turned right side out. So again, I'm going to take my little point turner, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to gently push out my seams all around. Come down here to the bottom. Here's our base where we did those gathering stitch. And I'm going to see if I left any of it showing. Yep, here's a little bit right here. You see how you can see that stitching right there? So all I'm going to do is take my friendly Jack the Ripper, and there it is. I got a hold of it right away. And give this a tug and pull all this out. Finish looking around, also poking it out with my fingers as I go. Okay, looks like I got all that gathering thread out. Okay, so now our bunny's pretty much done. We just need to stuff him and sew up that turn hole. All right, so let me get some more of the polyfill. There's a big blob of that. And also, you need something to weight this guy down. If you're going to use this to put out like as a decoration, you're probably going to want something to make it stand up easier. So you can actually buy like pellets, weighted pellets. But you know what I use? I just use plain old dried beans from the grocery store. Take a Ziploc baggie. I think I'm going to go get a smaller snack size because this is kind of small or large to be just putting it into the base of this bunny's body. So hold on. All right, so I'm back now. I got a snack size one. I think that's better to go into this little space here. And actually what's even better is a bag like this. I get a lot of these because I buy zipper pulls to use on zipper tape, and they frequently come in bags like this, and I just save them because you never know when you might need one. And that would work great too if you happen to have any of those little bags around. But most of us have a snack bag, so I'm going to use that. So I'm just going to open it up and put a handful of beans in here. I think maybe about 1/4 of a cup at the most. Doesn't take much. I think that's about what I got on here. Just going to get rid of all the air. Going to zip this closed. Then I'm going to move them down so they're more at one end, like that. And I'm going to trim this bag down along the seal edge here. This green part here, because you don't need all that. So my 2 stripes there at close to the beans are the part that seals it. Because we're not going to be opening this. This just gets sewn right into this bunny. And then, like I said, I got my beans down towards one end. So I'm just going to fold this in half like this, because this is a good size to just slip in to the bag once we get to the bunny's body once we get to that part. So here's all my polyfill. So now in that little 3-inch hole that we left, I'm just going to slowly work at stuffing all this in and moving it up towards the bunny's head first. Go up and stuff that side here first, just using my fingers. There's no real right or wrong how you do this. Said you can use beads if you prefer the beads. I just like polyfill, cheap. You can use it to make pillows, pillow forms too. Almost got him filled. I like the head where that is. One more here, and then we'll put the beans in, and then we'll add more polyfill if we still need it after those beans are in here. Okay, you can see the bunny's starting to get kind of poofy. All right, so here's my bean bag. I'm going to put that in through that opening. Just working it slowly in. And then I'm going to get this towards the bottom because that's where you want the weight. You want the weight at the bottom of the bunny, like that, to help hold him upright. So now I'm just finishing stuffing this guy up, keeping the beans down at the bottom until I completely fill up his body here to the puffiness and thickness I want. kind of move it around with your hands in here too, so that you don't have like lumps of it forming, but it's more fluid in there. All right, I think I need just one more little smidge of this in here to make this base a little bit fuller. All right, so now I like how this bunny is. I like how the stands up and how full his body is. So we have one last thing to do. We have to figure out how to close that hole. You can see the hole here. So I am going to bring this together and pin it closed. Just like that. Okay, now you can actually do this on your machine. You can sew a very tight little stitch right at that edge. Or if you hand sew, you could take a piece of thread and a sewing needle and just do a quick little whip stitch. Doesn't need to be really hidden unless you'd like it to be more hidden, like you do a hem. And I have actually a needle here all threaded on my little chicky guy that I keep all my sewing needles on. I say this guy was a gift to me, but I recreated this, and it's actually a project that you can find in the Fabric Fun with Cricut Design Space Facebook group that you can use or make, and he's very simple to make. Okay, so I've got my needle and thread. Where is that? There's the needle, there's the thread. So I'm going to go ahead and hand sew this closed, and I'll be back once that's done. Okay, so there's the bunny, all done, all ready to go. I'm happy with how he turned out. So I think this was a fairly easy project to make. Definitely between an intermediate and a beginner. If you can sew masks, you can definitely sew this bunny. No problem at all. Hope you liked my video.